Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Drool. This was the only issue of this very interesting underground comic from 1972. It was trying to be like a humor magazine, almost like somewhere in between National Lampoon and Mad. About a year or two before National Lampoon had come out and took the magazine world by storm. Within a couple of years, there's many imitators, and so I think Drool was trying to get in on that bandwagon. I don't know if you can tell from the screen, but the proportions are weird. It's almost like halfway between a comic book and a magazine format, as far as size goes. So it's very interesting. It's also for an underground. It's not as, it's pretty tame. There's definitely stuff in here that Mad Magazine would never allow. But, as far as like sex and violence, I think they were kind of hoping to maybe have a newsstand distribution for this so it could like go head to head with some of these bigger humor magazines. It's edited by Bill Sersky, and he was kind of the head honcho at this Cloud Comics studio, and we see a little logo there, even though it's Company and Sons distributes it. And Cloud Comics had the studio. They had a couple of undergrounds like All Duck Comics, Cloud Comics, and he kind of had the same stable of artists. That's why I almost think maybe it was a studio, and all these artists kind of collectively would put out this stuff and do art for other publications. This guy was part of that group. Even though it's signed to Mickey Pickles, this is the work of Tom Hatchman. And this guy did a few undergrounds for Cloud Comics mostly. And then in his bio, though, it said in the 2020, he finally actually made it to Mad Magazine and drew some stuff for them. But, the main thing here, it's kind of weird. It's kind of goofy. Not my cup of tea necessarily. But, man, this border art is incredible. Last night I spent like 5 to 10 minutes just looking at every millimeter of this. Obviously, it's, an homage or takeoff of the early Mad magazines, where Harvey Kurtzman developed the whole idea of all this intricately drawn gags and stuff in the border. You've seen it parodied or, paid homage to many times. Probably the most consistently in Weirdo, R. Crumb's magazine. But this one's like extra fat, and so it has even more room for more gags, and this artist fills it up. Just really fun, crazy, beautifully drawn, cartoony stuff. It's all over the place. And I think this cover's almost worth the price of admission. Oh, I forgot to mention, even the logo is 5 little gags, cartoon gags. This alligator is eating this guy's feet. And then the next O, he's eating the alligator's tail. Just really goofy stuff like that. Mom and Dad seal of approval. Kind of implying that this won't be, as gnarly as your average underground. The father's even saying, you can be rest assured that Drool Magazine is not pornography. I guess officially this is called Drool Magazine, #1. This artist is pretty interesting. Gail Berwin. And I think she was part of the Cloud Comics collective, or whatever you want to call them. This one's called City Slicker Bob with Marlene Ducktrick in Survival of the Fittest. And we just see all these rich people talking about how they can buy food, but they can't buy toilet paper. They're all living off of food stamps, even though they're rich as fuck. And very cute, weird, interesting, cartoony style, unlike I've ever seen before. But look at the chops on this. I kind of suspect some of these Cloud Comics guys were actually like graphic designers, did advertising, because that is super slick shit. The designer for Mansion 2 at the end, that's this woman could definitely work in advertising. One thing to note too is I've never seen lettering quite like this. The font design she comes up with, pretty neat. it really fits the nature of this strip too. So once again, showing how they're trying to be like Mad, a total movie parody, A Shockwork Lemon, story by Jay Kinney, great underground comics creator, and art by Ralph Reese and Larry Hama. So that's kind of strange. These mainstream comics guys, for the most part, being in this underground. I don't know how they broke down the art, but I would strongly suspect that Larry Hama did more of the breakdowns and layouts, and Ralph Reese did the finishes, because this just looks like Ralph Reese art to me, for the most part. This is kind of an interesting send up of the movie. It's not just like a Mad One where they just show the movie and they just throw in stupid gags. This has this whole goofy premise where the 4 droogs in Clockwork Orange are actually super nice guys who are just driving around trying to help people and then getting abused for their efforts. And, they parody scene by scene. So that one of those early scenes where they go to that mansion and they cripple the writer, the old writer, and they rape his wife. They show up at the door just to do Christmas carols. And the residents of the mansion pretty much abduct them and abuse them. They're Nazis. They're very horrible people. And they beat the crap out of all of them. Man, this is some really nice art. Very slick, great Ralph Reese stuff. They hang out at the Krishna Health Bar and drink carrot juice. The dialogue is all using that strange language that the book has. They meet that old drunk in the alleyway, and they offer to give him some food and some spare change, and he attacks them with his cane. Says, "You goddamn do-gooders creeping up on me while I'm sleeping. Leave me alone." I like in this how Alex is obsessed with Mantovani instead of Beethoven. So it's definitely we see a little glimpse of every scene. And then they find this cute kitty, Stray. And they say, "Hey, there's this lady on the outskirts of town who loves cats. Let's see if she'll take care of it." But when they get there, she's just like, "Get the hell out of here. I have too many cats as it is." She calls the cops. She says, "There's some maniacs at my door." So Alex is just kind of sneaks into her house and says, "Hey, Willie, you got to take this poor little kitty." And she says, "I'll take that cat." And she puts in this meat grinder. I love this how all of her cats are just looking very expectantly. Like, that looks like cat food. So she starts beating him up, and the cops come and arrest him. And so then we see, a parody of the infamous Ludovico technique. Here it's called the Kubrick treatment. I like how the scientist, he actually has the diction of Alex's caseworker in the original movie, but he's all like, "My dear fellow, I'm afraid you've been a bit distraught, yes? Doing good where no good is asked, yes? Interfering in things not your business, yes?" And so instead of showing him random violent imagery, they're just showing him the film Clockwork Orange. And he says, "This ought to get you straight, set you straight." And then we see the last panel, I guess it worked, and Alex is a total sociopath beating up this poor blind beggar. That's way better than most Mad movie parodies. So here, once again, another Mad type article, but the humor is definitely more adult than anything Mad would do. This is following Nixon's diplomatic success in China, and was right around this time. So they're suggesting that, he should visit this place that we have no diplomatic relationship with, Nixon's trip to Harlem. So Richard and Pat Nixon go to Harlem. I forgot to mention, story by Stephen Barnett, art by Peter Bramley. Peter Bramley was definitely part of that Cloud Comics Mafia. He he got around. He drew a lot of stuff for the early National Lampoons. He Also drew for the knockoffs like International Insanity and Apple Pie. And he even did stuff for Crazy Magazine and Marvel. So I guess that was his bag, doing those humor magazines. I like his very cartoony style. Kind of reminds me of a little like Gilbert Shelton-y. It's a goofy gag. Free Bobby Seale, one to a customer. It's pretty dumb. Of course, I'm chuckling, so. And so we see very broad caricatures of people in Harlem in 1972. Things weren't that great then. It was pretty shitty, but of course, this is way over the top. We have a parody of Walter Cronkite. Of course, he's called Walter Chronic. And that's something that like National Lampoon should be given credit for. Almost every like fake funny news article, parodying a newspaper, every person in it has to have a silly name. Like if they talk to some, Italian barber, his name is like Sal Forget About It. But then National Lampoon, and then definitely on like later The Onion, it's such a, I don't know, like vaudeville type burlesque silly thing. It kind of takes you out of the actual satire. And they do that by, still people were doing it though. So he's Walter Chronic. It's interesting too, they have this weird sight gag of the word balloon tails are like wrapping around him. It's almost like he was predicting Jablonski's work. Because in the 90s, Jablonski went nuts with those word balloon tails. They started taking over the panels. So Nixon's going around being all diplomatic or trying to be. But yeah, this is how over the top it is. It's like, a school teacher is teaching her kids how to shoot up heroin in class. And of course, when they're ready to leave, their official, Air Force helicopter is stripped for parts. But still really like the cartoonian. It's very fun, funny stuff. This next one is called, it's ABC presents Art Wimplewetter as The Patient. And this is a parody of some TV movie, I imagine. I don't know what the hell they're parodying. But obviously it starred Art Linkletter. That's what the parody's of. He was kind of big at the time. But I could care less. This is written and drawn by Ned Sontag. And beautifully drawn. When I discovered Ned Sontag in the 80s, he did not draw nearly this well. This is really nice looking stuff. By the 80s, he kind of had this, I don't know, just more lumpy, bulbous style. But Ned Sontag was an interesting cat, did some underground stuff. And then he started working for Marvel. And he would be in their black and white magazines. He had a backup in Howard the Duck magazine called Street People. I read that like when I was 13 years old, and I was like, what the hell is this? This is weird. Because it was kind of undergroundy, but, it was very clean. It was PG rated, but it kind of read like an underground. It was about these hippies hanging out in a communal house. So I'd never read anything quite like that, where people weren't just punching each other every page. This is kind of a high concept, meta concept. We see this hippie screenwriter, who I'm pretty sure is it's like a parody of Bill Skulky. Let me make sure I keep fucking up his name, I'm sorry. Bill Sersky. And he's pitching to this Hollywood executive, television executive. He says, I got this idea. There's a guy who's laid up in a hospital bed and he's having these hallucinations. And the executive says, okay, here's $100,000, make me a pilot. So then we see the movie that he makes. And it's just a guy lying in bed. His family visits him. And thinks he starts tripping out. This woman visits him. She looks like a rabbit lady. Oh, God, I love this art. This is really good. Bozo the clown visits him. The nurse looks like a duck lady. And this other duck dude comes in. And then Timothy Leary and Ken Kesey arrive. Really strange caricatures of them. Kind of like it. And it looks like they blow coke up his nose. And then we see the main character. It looks like he's kind of seizing up in bed. And he sees his daughter as an angel apparition. And she says, "Come to heaven, Daddy." And then obviously he's dead. The nurse is like, "Mr. Wimpletter?" And he's passed away. This is a reference to Art Linkletter's was famous. Well, one of the reasons he was famous, his daughter died of a drug overdose. I think she was one of those hippies who like took acid and thought she could fly and jumped off a building. And so that became a crusade for his. He would speak out against drug use and such. So now we get back to the ABC television executive saying, "You're through in television. That was terrible." Great drawing here. And then we see the main character walking back to the offices of Drool Magazine saying, "Sigh, I have faith that good work is never wasted." Because, of course, it became a plot line for a goofy comic book strip in Drool. This whole thing. This next one is kind of fun. It's written by Jay Kinney, art by Peter Bramley again. This is called The Parent Addict, or How to Tell If Your Parents Are Abusing Drugs. And this is pretty fun satire. Just like saying, are you worried about your parents? Have they been acting strangely? Perhaps they're addicted to these drugs. And they're talking about like nicotine, alcohol, and even the pep pills that housewives took back then. I mean, it was weird. Like in the 60s and 70s, like half of the moms I knew were on like diet pills and shit like that. That's basically speed. They were just taking speed all day long. So it's written just like one of those pamphlets, "Are your kids on drugs? Here are the signs." It's pretty fun. And also I like, once again, Pete Bramley does some nice funny art, cartoony art. They talk about the adult drug subculture. All the slang for alcohol, hooch, booze, whiskey. Psychological symptoms, lowered inhibitions, impaired judgment. I like this, the paraphernalia of an adult drug addict. It's things like a corkscrew, a swizzle stick, shot glasses, ashtrays, Alka-Seltzer. And they show what it's like in a bar, and they make it just seem like this fucking hellhole. If you find a needle in your mother's arm, she is either a junkie, a diabetic, a seamstress, or a record player. That's how it ends. This next one's very interesting. Liberated Sisters. I wonder if this is parodying how in the late 60s, a lot of clergy were like protesting the Vietnam War, kind of taking on left-wing causes. And so this is like imagining, what if this group of nuns, this order, the Berrigan sisters, became total like radical, like the Weathermen or something. And it's written and drawn by Joey Epstein. And she was in a lot of underground comics. She was all over the female-centric ones. She was in women's comics, Wet Satin. And she also did stuff for this Cloud Comics group. She's in all of them. But she's got a pretty fun style, definitely unique, and definitely puts the work in. This is very much an homage to early Mad, Kurtzman Elder Mad. Tons of chicken fat everywhere. Look how dense this is. How much she's cramming in. Tons of jokes just thrown up against the wall. One thing that bothers me, though, is this horrible, typeset font. It's pretty crappy. But look at all these cameos. Alfred E. Newman, Nancy and Sluggo, Tubby and Lulu, the Katzenjammer Kids, the Archie Gang. So we meet our heroines here. And they're anti-abortion nuns even. Yeah, some of these sisters are drawn very sexy. I grew up Catholic, and I have that weird thing where, like, there's something very erotic about nuns. I'm not proud of it, but I think it's a common thing with, ex-Catholic boys. This is interesting. They're attacking, they're attacking a draft board, and they're throwing holy hand grenades. This came out 3 years before Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And it looks exactly like, the holy hand grenade. It's got a crucifix for a pin. And very interesting. Then again, Terry Gilliam read comics, so maybe he saw this. At one point, two of these nuns are hanging out with Jesus. And Jesus is very groovy in this comic. And in fact, so groovy that they all start having sex. I like how this little angel says, "It's okay, kids, they're married." So basically, Jesus says, you guys need like some big religious figure. Someone that people look up to, name recognition, and maybe, he could popularize these radical ideas that we want to push through. So he says, yeah, Billy Graham would be a good one, the famous televangelist. So they go to this show, this Coliseum, wherever he's performing, and they kidnap him, put him in this sack. When they open up the sack, it turns out they accidentally kidnapped Bill Graham, the famous rock promoter from the hippie era. Very interesting battle there. I don't know, something about it. So he says, well, look, chicks, if you can make cool sounds, you can really get to the people. And they're like, hey, maybe this is the way to spread our message. And for some reason, they figure that they're going to all shave their heads and become the 4 skinheads. They're not like a skinhead band like we know it today. They shave their heads and they become an overnight sensation. And once again, look at the work she puts in. Every face in this crowd is doing something silly or is an interesting design, or there's an alligator in the crowd. It's just kind of goofy, but I admire the attention and detail. Next, we have a solo Jay Kinney piece. That's always nice because Jay Kinney's a great cartoonist. I mean, he's a great writer and usually just writes for other guys, but what he draws, it's fucking great. So this is very mad, like rock and roll forecast for 1984. And, making all these goofy predictions. In 1984, John Lennon will have his own late night talk show. He'll replace Johnny Carson. Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones will be everyone's favorite Times Square New Year's Eve hosts. Because back then, all the New Year's Eve hosts were always like old square guys, like Guy Lombardo. But of course, now it's all big rock stars host that shit. But that seemed like a crazy concept at the time. Bob Dylan will have moved to Israel and become a rabbi. The big fashion statement then will be to shave your head and get skull tattoos. That's the big fashion. Female impersonation will be passé. Male impersonation will be in. It's so dumb. See these women with fake beards. Interesting that he says the future format for record albums will be these little like metal slugs that project 3-dimensional holograms that perform the tunes, but they kind of look like mini CDs. Just some more goofy jokes, about what the future is going to bring to the world of rock. Just really well drawn, though. Nice stuff. I really like Jay Kinney. He's a smart writer. This is pretty great. It's pretty funny. The Sickness Aptitude Test by Chris Rush, with illustrations by Larry Todd, longtime underground comic cartoonist. And this was kind of a popular thing in the early 70s, like sick humor, which I kind of liked. And basically it's like sick, shocking humor, which a lot of this would not be kosher today. And here's an example. For 2 points, place in order of outrageousness the following: bawling in a confessional booth, farting in a bathtub and biting the bubbles, stealing bloomers from a convent clothesline, getting an erection while serving as a pallbearer, losing your bridge during cunnilingus. See, Mad would never allow that, obviously. What's the difference between a bunny rabbit and a Puerto Rican? Obviously, I'm not going to read that. And that is not cool. But this is what it was like in the 70s. Pretty funny stuff. Cherished items. Which of these would you choose? Lee Harvey Oswald's first BB gun? Billy Graham's first silver-plated vibrator? It's weird stuff. Pretty funny. And then we close out the issue with the editor, Bill Skursky's Fumetti, called 15 Fingers of Doom. And it's a pretty dumb comic, but it's pretty well done. This is he put some work into this Fumetti, and it looks pretty good, except for the fact that the photos are a little too overexposed, a little too dark. I don't know if that was a printing thing, but sometimes it's even hard to see the photos. But they're all well designed, well composed panels of these photos. It's basically like a goofy Flash Gordon-y type thing where Atragon and Yolanda are covertly entering this evil city called Necropolis, which is ruled by Moonshrinker and Moon Widow. We see the villains. That's pretty cool looking, whatever the hell that is. But it's really just zany humor, like he wrote it while he was high or something. It looks like quite a production. All these costumes and was like special effects. And it continues on the back cover, and it stays continued because apparently it was going to continue somewhere else. Maybe it did. I don't know. But it leaves us on a cliffhanger, and maybe we'll never find out what happens to these goofy characters. So there you go, guys. Drool Magazine #1. Really fun magazine. I mean, this is quite a weird find. I never heard of this until I found it in some cheap box. And I didn't even realize it was an underground necessarily. I was like, oh, this is one of those National Lampoon knockoffs. But I mean, it obviously is. It's Company and Sons put it out. Jay Kinney's in it. All these underground cartoonists. So yeah, it's an underground. But different than most. And I kind of wish it succeeded. I kind of wish this was like on the newsstands where you'd pick up something this fun and radical just right next to your Time magazine. But I guess we had National Lampoon for that, so we lucked out there. Okay, hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching. And hopefully I'll see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.